The 2026 season hasn't even begun, and yet there's already a growing sense that something is off. Long before the lights go out for the first race, a quiet technical interpretation has triggered outrage, panic, and behind-the-scenes lobbying across the paddock. At the center of it all were two familiar names, Mercedes and Red Bull Racing, and a rule that, on the surface, looked airtight. What nobody expected was that the championship might be shaped not by a race, but by a sentence buried deep inside the regulations. On paper, the 2026 engine rules were supposed to reset everything. New power units, new philosophy, and a promise of closer racing. One of the cornerstone limits was engine compression ratio, capped at 16.1. To most teams, that sounded definitive. A hard line, a number you design around and never cross. Everyone assumed this value applied universally, whether the car was sitting still in scrutineering or screaming down the straight at full temperature. That assumption is what made what came next so disruptive, because the rule didn't say that. It only specified how the ratio would be measured. That subtle detail is where Mercedes went digging. Instead of asking what the rule was meant to prevent, their engineers asked a colder, simpler question: when exactly is this limit enforced? The answer was awkwardly precise. The compression ratio is checked when the engine is static, at room temperature, not when it's operating under race conditions. That distinction sounded harmless at first, but for engineers trained to think in microns and heat cycles, it opened a door, and once they stepped through it, there was no closing it quietly. As an engine runs, everything inside it heats up. Metal expands, clearances change. Mercedes didn't fight that reality, they weaponized it by designing connecting rods that expand in a very specific way when hot. They found a method to push the piston slightly higher inside the cylinder during operation. On the FIA's measuring rig, the engine was perfectly legal. On track, once temperature stabilized, the compression ratio climbed far beyond the static limit. Estimates suggest it effectively reached the equivalent of around 18:1 under racing conditions. That difference translates directly into power, efficiency, and lap time, not marginal gains. Real ones. In Formula One terms, an extra 10 or 15 horsepower isn't just a nice bonus. It's massive. It's the difference between attacking and defending, between being stuck in dirty air and clearing traffic entirely. Over a lap, that could be worth a quarter of a second. Over a race, it could decide whether you're fighting for the win or praying for safety cars. And most importantly, it's an advantage that doesn't rely on setup tricks or risky strategies. It's baked into the engine itself. What made the situation even more explosive, that Mercedes didn't try to hide any of this. From the very beginning, they approached the governing body, the FIA, and laid everything out. The design, the logic, the interpretation. They wanted confirmation before committing to the concept fully. And according to those involved, the FIA reviewed it and gave the green light. The engine passed the written rules exactly as they were defined. No deception, no last-minute discovery, just cold, precise compliance. Once the concept existed, it was only a matter of time before others heard about it. Red Bull, now running its own power unit project, caught wind through personnel changes and technical chatter. Reports suggest they've implemented a similar philosophy, though not yet as refined. That detail matters, because it means this isn't just a single team running away with the field, it's potentially two. And in a sport already hypersensitive to dominance, that possibility set off alarms. Then came the backlash. Ferrari, Honda, and Audi didn't discover the loophole early enough to build their engines around it. By the time the interpretation became widely known, their 2026 power units were already designed, tested, and locked in. Reworking something as fundamental as internal geometry isn't a quick fix. It takes months, sometimes an entire season. From their perspective, they weren't beaten by superior execution, they were beaten by timing. Privately and publicly, frustration started spilling out. The argument wasn't that Mercedes broke the rules, it was that they broke the spirit of them. The regulation, rivals argued, was clearly written to cap compression in real terms, not just during a static inspection. Allowing thermal behavior to push engines far beyond that limit felt like a betrayal of the reset everyone had agreed to. Ferrari even hinted that formal protests could come as early as the season opener if performance gaps confirmed their fears. What made this especially uncomfortable for the FIA is that the complaint wasn't entirely wrong. In off-record comments shared by journalists, there's been an admission that this interpretation wasn't what the rule writers intended. Someone read the regulation in a way the authors didn't anticipate. That sentence alone changed the tone of the debate, because now the issue wasn't legality, it was intent. And intent is a dangerous thing to police after the fact. Banning the concept immediately would create chaos. Mercedes and Red Bull built their entire power unit philosophies around this idea. The engines are finished. The cars are designed to package them. Telling those teams to rip out a foundational element would mean massive redesigns, spiraling costs, and almost guaranteed legal challenges. Worse, it would send a message that following the approval process offers no real protection. That's not just unfair, it discourages innovation, the very thing Formula One claims to reward. But letting the advantage stand unchecked carries its own risks. Formula One doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's a business, and absolute dominance, especially so early in a new regulation cycle, is toxic for a viewership. The commercial rights holder, Liberty Media, depends on competitive uncertainty to grow audiences and sponsorships. If one engine philosophy steamrolls the grid for an entire season, the damage isn't just sporting, it's financial. That's why many insiders believe the most likely outcome is a delayed response. The FIA may allow the concept for 2026, acknowledging that it was approved in good faith, while quietly rewriting the regulation for 2027 to close the loophole permanently. It's not a solution that makes anyone happy. Mercedes still gains a year of advantage, rival manufacturers still lose ground, but it avoids the legal and political nightmare of retroactive punishment. There's also another possibility: controlled convergence. Instead of banning the idea outright, the FIA could relax certain development constraints to allow other manufacturers to catch up faster. In theory, that preserves the integrity of the rulebook while slowly erasing the gap. In practice, it depends on whether teams can adapt quickly enough without compromising reliability, and with frozen elements and cost caps looming, that's far from guaranteed. Time is what makes this situation explosive. Private testing is just days away. Once the cars hit the track, speculation turns into data. If Mercedes-powered machines consistently top the speed traps and pull away on straights, pressure will spike instantly. Ferrari won't wait months hoping the gap shrinks. Protests, meetings, and political maneuvering will accelerate. The FIA won't be able to stay silent for long. For fans, there's a strange sense of excitement mixed into the chaos. This is Formula One at its most, raw engineers pushing boundaries, rivals fighting through politics instead of lap times, and rules bending under the weight of unintended consequences. The biggest regulation overhaul in decades has delivered drama before a single competitive lap has even been completed. At its core, the controversy forces the sport to answer a question it never likes confronting directly. Should Formula One protect those clever enough to outthink the rulebook, or should it protect the show itself, even if that means stepping in after the fact? The answer won't just define the 2026 season, it will shape how innovation is treated for years to come. And until the FIA makes its move, everyone from engineers to fans is watching the same thing, waiting to see whether this advantage becomes a footnote, or the moment that decided an entire era.